know who lived right over there?
Elvis?
That's a good guess. Elvis loved the man's books, but he was one of the great 20th century mystics.
What's a mystic?
A mystic is someone who can experience the oneness of all life. Someone who, with their consciousness, can change human perception.
What was his name?
His name was Joel Goldstmih. Lived right here in Kailua, and I used to listen to him speak when I was not much older than you are. He taught me to meditate. You meditate, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Wow, you started a lot younger than I did.
I wish I could have met him.
As Joel said, at this time that he was teaching, there will come a time, 50 years later, that children will be born and they don't have to go through the meditation or the contemplation or what he went through for the 30 years of his own experience, that they will be born into that.
What if you were out in the desert and there was nothing around and you closed your eyes and you heard the word consciousness?
Ooh.
And then what if you looked up at the stars and there were a billion stars and you closed your eyes again and all those stars were in your mind? What would you think?
World would be infinitely beautiful.
Joel is a voice that brought me back from currents that were insane. Or I went to a healer with stones, and it was in this place that looks like Alibaba's cave, and there were monks there, and they were going to heal with all sorts of stones because I was looking for healing. And so you had to wait forever to see the monks, and then I finally walk into this beautiful place with all these stones, and the monk comes up to me, and then he looks, and I'm gonna pick these esoteric stones, and then he says, "Come here, I have something better." And then I say, "Okay." I'm like, how big is this stone going to be? And he takes me to this library, and he takes out practicing the presence. Especially he speaks to me in English, which is shocking, because he says, "Come here, I have something better." He takes out practicing the presence, and he gives me, and he looks at them, and he says, "Joel Goldstmih, you know?" And then I said, "Yeah, I know.
Joel Goldstmih was looking for God. He searched the libraries of the world for books and manuscripts that would give him insight into spiritual reality. He learned ancient Greek and Latin, studied Hebrew to read the sacred manuscripts in their original tongue. He mastered Sanskrit to understand the Upanishads. Making friends with gurus, rabbis, ministers, and philosophers, he listened to their revelations about their spiritual traditions. Joel traveled all over the world, first when he was 16 for his father's business, then as a teacher and a lecturer. He went to ashrams and temples, visited the ancient world, Rome, Athens, Istanbul, and Patmos. He had a special place in his heart for London. Some of his finest work took place in England. And he lived all over the states, from New York to Florida to Boston to California. But he found his spiritual home in Hawaii. Yet he always loved the city. He was a New Yorker, born and bred, and it was in the city where people first recognized his healing consciousness.
That he had this experience walking from point A to point B on a street in New York City. It was a work day for him, and an extraordinary set of events started to take place, and he didn't know why it was happening to him. He wasn't special. He hadn't had any kind of religious training, but people began to ask him for prayer. And that was the actual word. Something about you, sir, told me that you could help me.
You see, the entire ministry of the Infinite Way had its beginning with an experience. I was very fortunate in having been brought up in a home where no religion was taught. That was my greatest blessing. My mother set me free to find God. She taught us the 10 Commandments so that in obeying them we would be good citizens and stay out of trouble. But for the rest, she said, you will find God yourself.
Joel's Infinite Way message is part of the great history of American religious evolution. Enlightened people like Ernest Holmes and women like Mary Baker Eddy and Emma Curtis Hopkins and Myrtle Fillmore brought spiritual healing back to the church. Mystical awareness was coming in through gurus from the East with the realization of the oneness of God, and they all helped people overcome the limitations of material belief. No longer was humanity trapped by disease, lack, and sorrow. This new consciousness showed a way through and brought freedom.
I didn't come to this with a belief in God, yeah? But I opened Joel's book, Practicing the Presence, and just the words, practicing the presence. I mean, how beautiful is that? Practicing the presence, and then actually having that experience. This is not something that's an intellectual, this is, you reach a peace so that nobody can take that away from you.
In the classes that Joel was giving all over the world, people were finding a newfound freedom. They learned scripture from a different consciousness, one that revealed the unity of God and man. Healings and individual transformations took place that lifted people into a new dimension. Joel taught that the kingdom of God was within you, not in churches and organizations.
I would say that consciousness means to me is just relaxation. Like whenever I'm at school, whenever I'm stressed, my mind is just in so many different places, but when I just relax, I just feel super good, and that's when I'm at my peak performance, and I just try, and I do pretty well when I just meditate and just do good and like relax.
50 years ago, the word consciousness was not in the lexicon at all, and meditation was practiced only in monasteries, ashrams, and by those seeking illumination. It was also the decade that changed the way society looked at religion, how it dealt with people's individual rights, their speech, their sexual behavior, and their ideas about God. Mysticism was misunderstood, and those practicing mystical principles kept their spiritual life secret. Yet students on every continent were reading Infinite Way books, attending Joel's classes, and learning to meditate.
I had been to a conventional church where a lot of stand-up, sit-down, the singing of the hymns and the sermon, and what was missing for me was this actual communion, this actual feeling that you got when you went into meditation, and you were, and that's the thing that was most significant for me with Joel, was the meditation.
The word consciousness itself is the most important word there is in all of the Infinite Way teaching. Primarily because of the revelation which I received many, many years ago, that consciousness is the substance of life. Consciousness is the substance, the law, the activity of life. In other words, the nature of God is consciousness. Consciousness constitutes our being and all that concerns us, from a needle to an anchor, from a blade of grass to a star. Consciousness is the substance of all form. Consciousness is the activity not only of all life, but even of the body, this very body with which we walk and eat and sleep. Consciousness is the essence and the substance of all that is.
I just have to say this, the main thing about Joel is when I met him, I met a real human being, someone that was human, that had their feet on the ground, and I thought, oh, all those, I thought I'd meet some, you know, hard to relate to spiritual person that you could admire, but you couldn't really talk to. But this was a real person, and I was so happy. Because as I say, being from New Jersey, we like real people.
Yes, that's great.
Many famous people love the work of Joel Goldsmith, like Doris Day and Rock Hudson, and the famous Broadway playwright John Van Druten, who wrote the introduction to the book The Infinite Way. He questioned who and what is Joel Goldsmith, a healer, a teacher? And Elvis Presley loved the work of Joel too. He sent many of his books to friends as gifts.
Joel says in The Infinite Way, "Always there have appeared men bearing the divine message of the presence of God and of the unreality of evil. Buddha of India, Lao Tzu of China, Jesus of Nazareth. These and many others brought the light of truth to men, and always men have interpreted this light as the messenger, failing to see that what they were beholding as a man out there was the light of truth within their own consciousness."
You mentioned the word consciousness, that you were living in this consciousness. And we know that, like we were saying earlier, we can't describe consciousness.
I think consciousness, no, you can't. That would be trying to describe infinity, and we can't. But I would say consciousness is a state. For myself, I put it this way, it's a state of being. But in that state of being, you are aware. You are aware without thinking that something is. And it's not a mental process, of course, but it's a knowing.
So Cole, what is this?
Isn't it a pot?
Well, you could call it a pot, but is that really what it is?
Then is it clay?
Yeah, it's clay. Before you can have a pot, you have to have the clay. And before you can even have the pot, you have to have the consciousness, the idea of the design. So, you know, everything that we see that's made really began as an idea.
All creation comes forth from a source. And if you have the source, you can have the creation. But there is no way to get the creation separate and apart from the source of the creation. It would be as if you wanted a desk, and you set your mind on having a desk. And someone says to you, oh, but you must have a piece of wood first. Oh, don't bother me with that. Don't bother me with that. I want a desk. No, but, well, then I want a desk. But there is no such thing as a desk until you have the wood. No, then they go and look for another teaching, one that will get them the desk without getting the wood.
Consciousness is total awareness of the unseen and the seen at the same time.
Joel was born right here in New York City in 1892. His parents were orphans. They grew up in the Hebrew Orphan Asylum in Upper Manhattan. When Joel was 14 in 1906, he left school to join his father's import business. His father was quite successful. The family lived in a 10-room apartment on Riverside Drive and employed a full-time housekeeper and chauffeur. Joel's father traveled often, mostly to Europe, leaving Joel as the man of the house to take care of his mother and sister. Joel's mother had been an opera singer, and she and Joel regularly attended musicals, vaudeville, and the theater. Yet Joel seemed to be a restless young man, always wanting to experience everything in life. His mother told him his problem was that he was looking for God. Joel replied that he couldn't find him. No matter who I talk to, they don't seem to know him.
I was sent to Europe at 16 and a half years of age to learn the foreign end of the import business. And my first week in Europe was in England. And I stood on a street corner after having visited many cathedrals and Westminster Abbey and churches, when a newspaper extra came out that the British fleet and the German fleet were lined up in the North Sea ready to shoot. It so happened that wiser heads prevailed and World War I did not begin until 5 years later. But it might have begun that day. Now this is a very strange thing. They're talking about a war, but for years and years and years, people have been praying for peace. And they've been praying for God's government. And they go to church, and they're good. Is there no God to answer? No God to listen? No God to intercede? What is this thing about God?
5 years later, Europe was at war, and Joel's father was on his deathbed in London. But he was healed through the work of a Christian Science practitioner, and this began Joel's journey into metaphysics. By the time the United States entered the war, Joel had become a Marine. While at Paris Island, studying his Bible, it fell on the floor and lay open to the passage where Jesus said to pray for your enemies. He couldn't understand how he could be killing his enemies and at the same time praying for them.
I love the story you told about you were watching a movie.
Both watching a World War II movie. There's a battle scene going on and this and that. And it went to commercial. And I was sitting on the floor and Joel was in his lounging chair. And I turned to him and I said, "Grandfather, were you in the war?" And he says, yes, I was in the war to end all war. But he says, that was World War I. He says, this is World War II. And I said, there was a World War I as well. And he said, yes, that's why they have that. And I go, well, I guess that makes sense. But he said, that was the war to end all wars. And he said, I went in to serve my country. And he said, but the one thing I carried with me is that every day I prayed for my enemy. Every morning before I started my day, I prayed for my enemy.
After the war, the Goldstmih businesses failed. Europe was in chaos, and Joel was now selling women's clothing instead of imported lace. These were challenging times. Everything was changing, yet he found that there was something functioning in his consciousness that would see him through the ups and downs of this period in his life.
I think if you're in business, you're going to be faced with periods where things are going well. You're faced also with periods where things are seriously not going well. Certainly that was my experience. And to have a method, to have a way of accessing peace inside yourself. I mean, every single day before going out to my business, I would sit there and take the time to go inside, to know that the world is within me. And just that knowledge allowed me to let go of all the worries that were there.
Yes.
And to touch that point of peace and to know that life was going to be good this day, that I would be in some kind of way guided.
The most important things in life to know or to be consciously aware of, are a connection with the source of all existence, and to understand ourselves as consciousness. And the way that you go about to do that is through turning within and meditation. It's really just that simple.
The moon belongs to everyone. The best things in life are free. The stars belong to everyone. They gleam there for you and me. The flowers in spring and the robins that sing, the sunbeams that shine, they're yours, they're mine. And love can come to everyone. The best things in life are free.
the very beginning of my work, a man dedicated a poem to me, and he called it, "The Greatest Things in Life Are Free." And the reason was that he was a very prosperous man, a very successful businessman. And, well, he had no time. That was his whole trouble. He just had no time. Morning, noon, and night, and all night, he had to work at his possessions. And as he studied with me, and I would say to him, "Let's take this weekend off." I can't do that. I can't do that. Can't do that. No, I have to take care of my business. Well, now, come on. Let's have a few hours. No, I just have appointments. And well, now what are we going to do with all this money? After all, at the rate you're going, you'll probably drop dead before you get a vacation to spend it on. And so it was that out of the spirit it came, let's look around here and see if we can't find some things to enjoy that don't cost any money. Let's go over to Central Park. Just stand around those lakes and watch the kids with their little boats, so forth and so on. And the first thing you know, we were in Central Park. And on another time, we were on a roof garden. Another time, we went to a musical concert. And the first thing you know, he began to say, really the great things in life are free. Yes, if you can free yourself. There is where we lose out. The world is free, but we aren't free. And so he wrote this poem, which later became a song. The greatest things in life are free.
Spring, and the robins that sing, the sunbeams that shine, they're yours, they're mine, and love can come to everyone. The best things in life are free.
What is that word? That peace. Truly, that's what it is. I think if you have peace, you have everything.
I think the central themes are still, about understanding the world and understanding the way to access and be at one with that spiritual source that is yourself, really.
He said, in the Old Testament, that God of all that anger and vengeance, and he said it was never about men or nations. It was about human consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
The end of human consciousness.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's wonderful.
That's it.
That's right. And then that takes it off the person.
Mm-hmm.
Takes it off humanity.
Yes.
There is no fallen man.
No. No, he says it was all about the end of human consciousness.
I knew a man in Cairo, an Egyptian, Muslim, and a friendship sprung up between us. We're at the opposite ends of the pole in almost every human way. And yet there was a spiritual bond between us, because after I had spent about a week with him when I first met him, he presented me with a set of amber beads, prayer beads, which he told me his own father had carried to Mecca to have blessed. And these were his great possession, which ordinarily should have been should have been sent down to his sons. But he didn't feel that his sons were worthy of so sacred a gift. And on this 1 week's acquaintance, he did feel that they should be in my possession. He gave them to me, and I still possess them.
This story is very apropos for today. It reminds me of that great Shakespearean stanza that Joel loved. My bounty is as boundless as the sea, my love as deep. The more I give to thee, the more I have, for both are infinite.
On another trip, and this must have been a couple of years later, or I had seen him once or twice in between, but this is a couple of years later, and I arrived in Cairo when there was some difficulty, soldiers patrolling the streets and the airport and so forth, and I arrived at 1 o'clock in the morning, did not get to my hotel until 4 in the morning, and I had no way to locate this man on Sunday. I knew where I could locate him in business, but not at home. And so, of course, my thought was that as soon as Monday would come along, I would look him up. But you can imagine my desire to be with him. At any rate, by 8 o'clock, I was out on the street walking. And I walked up the street until I came to a circle. And out from this circle were 4 streets, one in each direction. And of course, all I had in mind was a nice Sunday morning walk.
If you were to tell me a story about your spiritual journey with a beginning, middle, and end, what would you tell me?
Well, first of all, I have to think about what I can tell you. You know,
Yes.
'cause there's certain things I cannot say.
Of course.
But I would like to start at the end.
Oh, okay.
And say that there is no end, right?
Great.
It's just a continuous journey.
Lovely.
And I would have to say the same thing about the beginning because I don't know where it began. So all I can tell you is about what's going on right now here in the present moment.
Now, which street shall I walk? Well, I decided to take this one. And so I walked to this street, turned just in that direction. There stands my friend up against a building with his prayer beads praying. There are a couple of million people in Cairo. But on this street, at this building, right before my eyes, he stands. And I called his name. And he opened his eyes and he said, "Oh, Goldstmih, I'm standing here praying for you. I told my wife this morning I must go out on the street and pray for you till you come. I need you so." And of course he had no idea that I was anywhere near Egypt or even expected there. But he was praying for me to come, and there I was on this one particular street where he was. Now, you understand that I had not asked God to lead me to him, and actually, even if he did, it wasn't what he meant. He was communing with his God, whatever concept of God he might entertain. And the point is this, that since I live in God, since I turn inwardly for guidance and receive it, how could I not be where I should be at the moment when I'm expected there, even if I do not plan it that way or anyone else? This is what I mean to convey to you about meditation, inner communion, and as you will eventually see, prayer.
After many years as a Christian Science practitioner, Joel left the church. His first wife had died, and in 1944, in the midst of World War II, he moved here to California. The freedom he felt must have been liberating. California, after all, was the seat of new thinking and welcomed gurus, truth seekers, and artists from all over the world. Soon people were asking Joel to teach him the Bible. He met writers and businessmen who were exploring the nature of consciousness. Writers like Alan Boone, who wrote Kinship with All Life, and studio head Edward Maul, who was in charge of such films as Magnificent Obsession and Imitation of Life. Joel married his second wife, who encouraged him to write his book, The Infinite Way, which he did on long winter weekends in Palm Springs. And then came more than 80 books, letters, and pamphlets. He began to pull away from the Christian Science teaching that mind is God.
Because if you have the unconditioned mind, the spirit or consciousness can unfold.
The infinite way is not in agreement, for instance, with the teaching that mind is God, or that God is mind, or that truth is a power over error, nor does it attempt in any way to demonstrate health or supply or companionship or happiness as such. And it is for this reason that if we are not careful, we bring with us some of our former concepts, and they act as barriers to the fruitage of our work. This is more important than you believe.
Joel writes in The Art of Meditation that meditation is an experience, and inasmuch as the experience is an individual one, it can never be confined with any predetermined pattern. Meditate, pray, dwell in the secret place of the Most High, and you will discover that the truth you are seeking already abides within you. That is why the statement that is so potent is that which I am seeking, I am.
I had this incredible experience, which changed my life. And then little by little, inkling by inkling, I got more that I would call gifts. And then one of the gifts that I got about 2 years ago was the gift of ceaseless prayer. So that I say that, I meditate a lot. I would say all the time.
So it's as if you live in that consciousness.
Yeah, I definitely think, and I think when I don't initiate it, it initiates itself.
Yeah.
And so that's why I call it a gift.
We are learning the art of meditation. We are learning how to be still, not to blank our minds. You can't blank your mind, but your mind will of itself get still. That's why we have these teachings on meditation. You see, if you try to blank your mind, 99 times out of 100 you'll fail completely, and the 100th time you might succeed and just do away with your mind, and some people have done that to their very great loss. Don't try to blank your mind, but if you follow the instructions on meditation that are in the Infinite Way writings, and you'll find there are about a dozen different methods of meditation shown, you will find the simplest one is to take the word God, or the word Christ, or the word Spirit, or Soul, or the word Tao, or the word Brahm, or the word and nothing finer than or Tao, or Brahm, or Christ, or Spirit. Anything that has God as its inner meaning. Some people respond to different words differently than others, and it doesn't make a difference, because a rose by any other name is just as sweet, and God, you'll find, is just as sweet with one name as with another.
Truth is existent in the now. To bring us into the awareness of spirit, we want to get the feeling of what this spiritual dimension is. We might want to consider about how this universe began. Modern physicists tell us that for energy to change into matter, for it to shift from its unseen and immeasurable state into measurable manifestation, it takes an observer. It takes consciousness. Consciousness is the universal observer that transforms energy into matter. So when our consciousness is realized in the spirit, our world is the pure expression of the divine.
In 1948, the infinite way was a local activity that hadn't gotten outside the state of California. It was locked up in just one state in the Union, and it had no roots any other place, it had no students any other place, it had no activities any other place, it had no supply any other place. That was a tiny little bit of a thing embodied in, I think, just 2 books and localized in one state. And since 1948, see how it has been fed and how it has fed 5 continents. You yourselves have witnessed how the groups have grown in England and how they've spread even from 1952 or 3, from London to many other parts of it. When we are one with God, we are not localized in a city, in a state, in a community, in a province. When we are consciously one with God, we become absolutely universal, but 2 ways. Universal in the opportunity to serve universally, universal in the sense of being fed universally and not just locally.
By 1950, Joel was driving every month from Los Angeles to San Francisco to give classes on the Bible. His interpretation of Scripture was radically different from the literal, orthodox, and intellectual perceptions. Biblical passages would come to him in meditation, and he began to discover their mystical meaning.
It was just such a happening that originally brought me to Hawaii. While driving from San Francisco to Los Angeles in my car, all of a sudden I heard, "He performeth that which is given me to do." And it repeated itself, and I thought, now that's either the Bible or Shakespeare. But since I have a concordance to the Bible, I'll look it up. It was the first time I had ever heard that passage. And sure enough, not only it says in the Bible, "He performeth that which is given me to do," but "He perfecteth that which concerneth me." And I rested in that. And then when I reached Los Angeles, the telephone bell rang and I was called to Hawaii. And it proved to be true. There was a case of a man dying with a heart attack. And by the time I got here, having given him help, and within a very short time, he was completely healed. But he that had called me here had performed the work. Then why call me here? Because the whole work unfolded here from this point, you see?
I was just thinking about a statement that says there can be no effect from any other cause. And what would that stimulate in your thinking?
There can be no effect from any other cause. I think that brings to mind a Hawaiian saying. It's Nana Ikekumu, which means to look to the source. I think in our lives we can attribute things to many different causes, but he reminds us, that it's that source, and really trying to understand what that source is. That's can guide us.
Do you not see? Behind the wisdom of the world, there is one word that makes all wisdom come alive. And that word is consciousness. Consciousness is the secret word and it is the secret behind every word. It is the secret behind the statement, "Ye shall know the truth." Take that statement into your thought for a moment. The Master did not say, "Truth will make you free." Just think of that, and think of the importance of that. He did not say, "Truth will make you free." Ye shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free.
He was adamant about freedom, and it comes through in all of his teaching. He wanted no organization, no followers. He did not want anybody to consider him a guru. Think that was anathema to him. No way.
The unconditioned mind is open, and you can communicate both in this world of human beings, and also you get guidance, silent, sacred, and secret guidance from the Holy Spirit.
I'm standing right here in Kailua, where Joel lived, and just behind me is where he swam every day. One time I took Emma to dinner, and I asked her if she and Joel were soulmates, and she said yes. I said, "Well, how did you know?" She said, "Well, one time we went driving around the island, and we stopped to look out at the sea, and all of a sudden we felt something. We were very still, very quiet, and we looked at each other, and we knew we were soulmates." And they got married shortly thereafter, and she continued to travel with him all over the world for the rest of his life.
We speak of our work as the infinite way. And this is a very good name for it because it doesn't mean anything. You cannot confine or define the infinite way. You cannot embrace it in your mind. Who can possibly know what the infinite is? Who can possibly know what the infinite way is? And that is good, because if we could understand it, it wouldn't be that at all. It is the infinite way because it is without limitation. It is for this reason that we have no organized religious activity and no memberships, no dues, all so as to keep it on its unlimited basis and that each one may be free.
Joel called everybody friend, from the actor, artist, musician, to the homemaker and business people, from every walk of life to everyone who came to his teaching. He considered them all friends. He introduced 5 women to carry on the teaching. They were Lorraine Sinkler of Chicago, Daisy Shigemura from Honolulu, Lorene McClintock from New York City, Eileen Bowden from Victoria, British Columbia, and Virginia Stevenson from Santa Monica, California. We honor them all and the many others who have lived and are living in the consciousness of truth.